Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to my driving review of my personal 2002 Toyota Corolla. Now, if you haven't seen my walk-around review, I recommend you watch that before just to get some background on this car. And I'll link that somewhere either in the description or up in the top right. Now, I am going to have to apologize. I'm not going to be able to go on any of the fun, twisty roads like a lot of reviewers do just because of my location. I would have to drive about 3 hours to find any fun roads, which is not worth it. So, sitting out in this car, this has the 1.8 liter 4-cylinder, which is the only engine you can get in this vehicle, and the 4-speed automatic. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This car is not the fastest vehicle. It does 0 to 60 in around 10.5, 11 seconds based on what I have done personally, and in this Arizona heat, it certainly is not any better. Now, when you're alone, it accelerates fine. It's never dangerous when you're alone, even with the air conditioner on, but the air conditioning does sap a lot of this vehicle's power. I will say though, when you have this car loaded down with people, it can get actually kind of dangerous. I'm a decently aggressive driver, and when I've had this car loaded down with 3 other people and all of our stuff in the trunk, I've refused to pull out in front of people because I know I don't have the power to get up and go in front of them. It's just, it isn't available. This car, when it was new to the crank, had around 125 horsepower and around the same amount of torque, but 17 years later, who knows what this car is really making. Now, after getting the power out of the way, I want to talk about some other driving characteristics of this vehicle. Now, I'm not going to say it's a fun car, because it's not. It has a lot of body roll, but at the same time, you have to realize how incredibly light this vehicle is. This vehicle only weighs around 2,400 pounds, so once you learn the weight and once you learn how the body leans and the tip and dive the vehicle does give you, you can kind of work with that, and in the corners, you can kind of have fun with it, actually. Even though, again, it's not a sporty car, it's not trying to be. It's trying to be a basic commuter Toyota Corolla, which is what you get with even the newest ones. Now, other characteristics of how this car drives, it is a very simple vehicle. So what you see is what you get. It has hydraulic steering, which I know a lot of people are going to go, "Oh, hydraulic steering, that must feel great." It feels average. At slower speeds, it's very heavy, and honestly, for this type of vehicle, I would prefer electric, like in the modern Corolla. But when you start getting up to speed, it does all right. It has, once you get off center, it changes directions pretty quickly, and it does communicate pretty well with what the front tires are doing, just by the characteristic of what hydraulic steering is. But on center fill still is lacking. There's about this much, about an inch of play left to right off center where the vehicle just doesn't move that much, and you don't have that much filling, which is fine for the highway, which I will show a highway segment in a few minutes, but it doesn't really inspire that much confidence. Now on harsh roads like that, it actually does all right. This vehicle does have a multi-link rear suspension, unlike the 2015 Corolla, which has a torsion beam, so it doesn't get crashy and too unsettled because the rear end can move separately instead of as one whole unit. And the suspension, in terms of its up and down factors, it gets settled pretty quickly. So if you do go over something that might unsettle the suspension, it just takes one smooth motion and it's fine. Now, that being said, if you have drove one of these and you're like, "Oh, well, this just feels terrible," it may be because of the age. This car personally has 4 new shocks all around and new tie rods. So it does feel better than it did when I first got this car on its stock suspension, because the rear end had already started to sag a little bit, which you see is very common in these vehicles. I'm not sure why the rear suspension sags quicker than most. Now, brake fill in this car, it has no ABS. It just has the normal master cylinder, which helps you brake quicker. Brakes, they are very solid, but they're nothing really to write home about. There's a little bit of play at the very top end, but then once you start digging into them, they're fine. Now, again, if you've drove one of these Corollas and you're like, "Oh, well, the brakes weren't that great," this car has new front rotors, front pads, and all new brake fluid, which I just did maybe 10,000 miles ago at the most. So the front brakes and the brake system are overall in pretty good shape. So in general, this car around town, it gets off the line pretty well because it is a standard geared automatic. But then once you start getting in to the higher speeds around the town, which is around, to me, 30 miles an hour, there may not always be the right ratio in this transmission. So it could get a little bit flat-footed where it has shifted from 1 to 2, but 2's ratio isn't quite right for the power, so you're just kind of stuck there at around 2 to 3,000 RPM, not getting any acceleration, which can be an issue at some times, but usually you just keep your foot there for another 4 seconds and it gets out of its own way. Now, even on roads like this, which is a very harsh road doing about 50, it isn't that loud. And when I get on the highway in a few minutes, you'll see that it's still, the road noise stays very quiet. Engine noise, however, again, which you'll see in a few moments when I get on the highway, it can get loud and it can get buzzy, and you do have to rev it to get any power, again, because it is a slow car and it makes all its power around 4,000 RPM and up, so you do have to rev it. Now, coming to a stop, as I said, the brakes work well, they feel solid, but there isn't really anything to write home about. And sitting here idle with the air conditioning on about medium to medium low, you do feel some vibration through the steering and through the pedals. Just again, it isn't a modern day car with the modern advanced noise vibration harshness dampening. So you do feel some rumbling through the seats, rumbling through the pedals, and rumbling through the steering wheel. Talking about gas mileage, around here in the city in Yuma, Arizona, where I always have the air conditioning on high, I get about 25 in the city, which is decent. And then out on the highway, driving across the country, I got about 35 to 36, which again, is decent, but it's nothing to really write home about in a vehicle this low of power and this lightweight. If you look it up, I think it says on Google around 40 to 42 on the highway, which is way more than what I've been getting in the over the year of ownership that I've had this vehicle. Alright guys, so up here I'm going to get onto the only really fun road we have, which is this entrance ramp where it's a very sharp turn. I'm going to turn off the air conditioning and stay behind this vehicle a little ways because I have a feeling they're going to ruin it for me. So I'm going about 10 right now on the floor. So that's at about 35, 40, 45, 50, and 70. So you can see that my foot was on the floor the whole time. So you can see it doesn't have the best acceleration ever, but it does all right. It's never unsafe when you're alone, as I was saying before. So I do have to apologize if any vibrations. I've tried to strap my camera down as tight as possible, but it isn't always the easiest to do. So on the highway, I've always said this car has no right to handle the highway as well as it does. I've had this up to sitting around 90 miles an hour, just cruising, not in America, of course, because none of our speed limits are that high. But up around 85 to 90 miles an hour, it's revving at about 3,500 RPM, and it's so smooth, and there is very minimum road noise at any highway speed. This car does have a little bit of wind noise just because of my wind deflectors, but that's my fault, not the car's fault. It is significantly quieter when you're just cruising than the 2015 Corolla, which, in my opinion, is almost unmistakable or unforgivable for Toyota nowadays. Hopefully, in their new TNGA platform, they will improve upon some of their faults. Now, on the highway in general, other than ride quality, power, which I keep bringing up because there's not that much. Fourth gear, it does okay and giving you 2 to 3 miles an hour. So for instance there, I went up about 4 miles an hour to pass that Buick in fourth gear, which is its overdrive. Now, because this is a mechanical throttle, it is pretty quick and pretty snappy to give you a downshift if it's available, but sometimes, as I was saying before, in more city driving, there isn't always a lower gear that you can go into because sometimes the only lower gear is first, which might send the engine revving too high. Now, talking about visibility, this car only has 2 front airbags, so it has no side curtain airbags. So that means that all of the pillars are very thin and very easy to see out of, A, B, and C pillar, which helps visibility a lot, but I'm fully aware that if I were to ever get in a side swipe or T-bone collision, I may not fare the best. Now, things such as seat comfort, these seats are nothing to write home about. They're not uncomfortable. I've never felt any pressure points, but they also aren't doing anything to help you. So they're right in the middle of they're acceptable, but it's nothing great. Steering on the highway, as I was saying before, it's very dead on center, which helps to keep vibrations out of the steering wheel, and you can almost just let it sit there and it tracks completely straight. One thing about it though, is because of its lightweight nature, wind will blow you around at any speed. Anything over about 30 miles an hour, you will feel the wind in this vehicle, and the faster you go, the worse it gets. Okay, so coming up on this exit, I will do a quick braking test. Again though, take in mind that this car has new front brakes and new brake fluid, so let me make sure that no one takes the exit behind me. Alright, so I'm doing about 65, and I'm going to put my foot down, not all the way, but most of the way, or 60. So that was down to 35 at about 3/4 brake pressure, and it did it all right. I would feel confident avoiding a situation where I was about to be in an accident, but you're not going to take this car on a racetrack anyway, or an autocross event anyway, so you don't need your brakes to perform as good as some sports car. Now, they will fade if you're on the highway a lot and you're very aggressive, which I am guilty of sometimes, and you're constantly slamming on brakes to avoid accidents or slamming on brakes to merge or get off the highway, they will fade. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. They will start to fade and lose some pressure in the brake system. Which again, that just has to do with how these older vehicles are designed, older compact sedans are designed, because everything in this is fresh. So here might be a quick opportunity to show you some acceleration from 40. So this is on the floor. It quickly downshifted, and now I'm at 65. So it's nothing horrendous, but it still isn't fantastic. So now, coming up to the end of this review, what do I want you to take away from this? Now, if you're watching this review, you either have been around my channel for a while, or you might have already owned one of these cars, or you're looking at maybe buying one used, or maybe about to inherit one, or whatever your situation may be. What I want you to take away from this review is this car, and pretty much all Toyotas, don't deserve the bad reputation that they usually get. So, as I said before, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This car isn't a sports car, but it's not trying to be. Back in 2002 or 1997 when this car was designed, Toyota just wanted a reliable, daily driven, compact sedan to go against things like the Honda Civic. And they made it perfectly. I've ridden a Honda Civic and I prefer this vehicle. This vehicle is a testament to Toyota and the way that they can build a vehicle where even 17 years later, for a car that was supposed to be the cheapest one available, it's still completely solid and completely reliable. This car has almost 140,000 miles and it has had no issues. This car also has no rattles. It seems like it was built to a higher standard than most vehicles in this class may have been, even by today's standards. So talking about driving dynamics in conclusion, again, it's not the fastest car. It could be considered unsafe at some points, but when you're alone, that usually won't happen. And once you learn the balance of the vehicle, you could have a little chuckle chucking around a corner, but it's not going to be like a new Focus ST or something to that caliber, or a Miata. It does have body roll, and it doesn't try to hide that, which is kind of the whole takeaway from this car, is how brutally honest it is. You see this car on the street, and without even driving it, you pretty much know what you're going to get into when you step foot behind the wheel. Everything is very intuitive and laid out very simply and very smart. Working on this vehicle, if you are an owner, for example, is very simple. Everything is a very similar size bolt and very easy to get to. And overall, is a good driving experience for a daily driven car. Are there better? Yes. But is there better for the money that you could find one of these on the used market? Not really. Because if you were to buy one of these used, you could probably get one even in this shape for around $2,500, which you're not going to find much better that's going to be as reliable and as solid and as comfortable as this Corolla is. And I promise I'm not just saying that because this is my personal vehicle. I do truly believe that this car doesn't deserve the bad reputation that it gets from some car enthusiasts. So with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I hope you will subscribe if you enjoyed this video, because I do plan to be making more with whatever vehicles I can get my hands on. Bye everyone.